Well, let's get it going. I'm Marlon Weems, publisher of The Journeyman, and I am here with my friend Arturo Dominguez, independent reporter, um, publishes his own newsletter as well as reports for other publications. And the reason that I wanted to talk to Mr. Dominguez, and those of you who've seen him on here with me before, know he's plugged into um, just the climate around immigration. He's located in Texas, but as I watched what was going on over the weekend in Los Angeles, I just thought, who better to talk to than Arturo. So Arturo, welcome. Um, I'll tell you kind of the way I am looking at this, and then you give me your take. I Every time there's something negative that happens in this administration, there's always something, hey, look over here. Now, I suspect this is something that's been planned for weeks, maybe if not specifically LA, some democratically run, city. So if it wasn't LA, maybe it'd be Chicago, maybe it'd be New York, somewhere. And I say that because, at least from what I've read, and when I read something sort of negative in a place like the Washington Times, which leans to the right, I feel like it's probably pretty close to the truth. And I saw a story,
Hmm.
and I think this might have happened a few weeks back, where Stephen Miller called in all these different heads of like 50 guys, different leadership positions within ICE and I think Homeland Security. And basically, they were pissed that they weren't rounding up enough people. I think they've given them a quota of like 3,000 folks a day, and actually they are not, in terms of um, deportation. They're actually behind um, Joe Biden, from what I hear. So what I'm told is that Stephen Miller specifically said, why, you guys are concentrating on criminals. You need to be rounding up everybody. Why aren't you going to Home Depots? Why aren't you going to, Lowe's and these places where you got day laborers? And lo and behold, where does this incident occur? Right around a Home Depot, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, that's kind of what I just feel like. It's very well orchestrated, and it's no accident that you had, Tom Homan on the scene, and you got all. It's just over the top.
Right. A lot of it is, when you see Tom Homan and stuff out there, it's because they're recording, propaganda videos, things like that to distribute across social media and on TV ads and stuff. But, the way the LA thing is like you said, they're going after Democrat cities. That's a quote unquote sanctuary city. It has a very large immigrant population. Non-citizens without any kind of paperwork, probably close to 1 million or just around there somewhere. But the biggest factor there is they went into a very marginalized community. A lot of Latinos, a lot of Black people, and they know the kind of response they're going to get when they come rolling in there with armored personnel carriers. And they don't need any of that stuff.
Man, you would have thought they were
Even
going to, Kiev. I mean, I saw some of these
right.
guys, and just the way they were geared up was just really astonishing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's setting people off, and I can understand that. I live in a pretty conservative community, but if we started seeing a bunch of armored personnel carriers and cops rolling down our street, I can guarantee you that even my MAGA neighbors would probably have a problem with that.
Mm.
That a lot of people are going to see that, and it's going to really rub people the wrong way, regardless of political equation, shall we say? But you go into a marginalized community like that, and that's the kind of reaction you're going to get. And I think that was intentional. People are going to want to protect their neighbors, their friends, their families, especially non criminals. the first day they went in there, all that manpower, all that chaos, and they arrested, I think 100 is what the number was. Only 5 were gang members with criminal records. Was not suspected of committing a crime. On the second day, they got 7, and yeah, over 100 that were non-criminals. They have no crimes against them. No, there's no accusations, no nothing. And today you see on MSNBC, and this is weird because this prior to this weekend, all of the news was doing the job they were supposed to do on ICE, like the job they should have been doing for years, and that's really reporting on what ICE does, because everything ICE does is dirty. But you see it over this weekend, the protest happened, and all of a sudden the coverage shifted from the inhumanity that ICE is dropping down on people to these protesters and violence, and they show the one car on fire and you know these things, and they make it seem like what's going on in LA is so much more out of control than it really is. And then you have the far right that's feeding that narrative too, with Trump saying the National Guard did a great job before the National Guard even got there.
Right.
It's it's all like basically propaganda at this point, and that's essentially what's driving. I just saw on the news whatnot. So they were talking about sending several hundred Marines in there into LA to basically shore up the situation until the National Guard, the 2,000 troops from the National Guard, can fully deploy. And again, it's unnecessary.
I mean,
You know,
most
the
of the action, or the protests is happening not actually in LA proper, but in Paramount, right? And so I don't really know that
Well,
how is Paramount compared, where is it located in relationship to like Metro LA?
right, right. I'm not clear on that either. I know that the National Guard that's there, the 300 or so, they're there to protect the federal buildings.
Sure.
Because that's essentially the limit of what Trump can do right now, without declaring some sort of insurrection act or something like that. Um, so it makes no to send Marines in there, um, to protect more buildings. Like, they have enough agents, they have enough security at those facilities. It's not, those are fortified buildings with armored gates to the parking garages, things like that. There's really no way to get in there.
People even
It's
trying to
it
do
just
it.
it's just
You know?
right. No, they're not. I mean, some people, maybe tried to get in the gate at the parking lot in one video that I saw, but that was the limit of it. You're not really going to get past there. And so yeah, like sending Marines and stuff. This is all. A lot of it is an intent to escalate. They want to escalate these things. When I talk to Jen Budd and there's other guy Brian, who's an ex ICE agent who more recently retired than Jen is. He was. They're both have the same feeling that they're putting these ICE agents in danger on purpose, without the badges, wearing street clothes, all that stuff. They want those guys attacked by someone, so then they
Mhm.
can use that to, send in military, invoke whatever, and it's kind of scary because when you hear that from former agents,
Mhm.
and if they're feeling that way, then the agents on the street have to be feeling that way too, like they have a bullseye on them.
Saw a video last night. I assume it was an ICE agent because I don't think the National Guard had arrived yet. Where they were shooting, they had rubber bullets and they shot this
Right.
Australian reporter. Have you
Yeah.
heard kind of what's going on around? I mean, because that I remember during I want to say it was during the Black Lives Matter protests. Some folks really got injured. I'm thinking of a journalist in particular that got hit in the eye with with a rubber bullet. I mean, those things
Right.
can really, you know, they're not necessarily lethal, but that doesn't mean they can't hurt you.
Right. Right. I mean, you get shot in the eye with one of those, it could potentially kill you. I mean, it's coming at a fast enough pace. But yeah, the Australian journalist, what's very interesting about that is somebody really and focused on the cop that shot her. And it's weird because there's really nothing going on in the background, and he's just staring at her, and out of nowhere, he just lifts his rifle and shoots her with it.
Yeah,
And
I
it's a
saw
good
that.
thing it was a rough yeah, good thing it was a rough bullet because, a gun like that was firing a bullet might have blown the bottom of her leg off, So, I know that the news outlet has denounced it, is demanding answers. I mean, but let's how many cops actually got in trouble in 2020 for some of the stuff? So, very few,
Right.
very few. Um, so I don't expect anything to come of that, but that's basically the same thing we saw several years ago, and it's the same thing that's been continuing forever. Cops typically when there's a protest, they're the provocateurs, right? They're the ones that provoke people. They're the ones that push and shove and really try to instigate a lot of stuff. But, you come and you look back to the protests, what, a month or 2 ago, there were mostly white liberals out in the streets protesting against Trump, and there was hardly any pushback, right? There was hardly even any cops. Um,
Mhm.
but you go into a Latino community, you go into a black community, and it's, guns blazing, it's, armored vehicles, it's high-powered
Flashback.
rifles, it's
I mean, really.
right, the National Guard. It's just stupid, and it's so obvious that I really people that refuse to acknowledge racism exists are just have to be willfully ignorant at this point. They are willfully just ignoring what's right in front of their face. Because how can you not see it? You know? Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everything about this administration is driven by race, by racism, and I know, for on the Democrat side, a lot of people keep saying we should dump identity politics, but that's what Republicans are running on,
Well, yeah.
and like you have to counter that.
th- I mean, white supremacy is identity politics. Um, I'm curious. If you have a thought on it. We were talking earlier about Stephen Miller, and basically they're using this sort of ginned up event to also
Mhm.
use as an argument for why they got to pass this bill. This I call it I have a different name for it, but they call it the big beautiful bill. So let's, keep it clean. But and so
Right.
I mean, how much is built into that bill for ICE and immigration related, stuff?
It's 150 billion right around there. ICE has pending contracts or bids out for, more detention space to the tune of like $45 billion. This is going to be a real big. If it passes, it'll be a boon to the private prison industry. And I know, you pointed out their stocks going up right after Trump was elected
Yeah.
and things like that. And I think you expect to see something similar if this bill passes because there's just so much money in there. And here's the killer: is if they were to just pass immigration reform, it would cost a tenth of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Reform
Well, that's
the
the point.
asylum system.
There's no
Bu-
money.
bu- there's no money. There's no money in solutions, but there's a lot of money in enforcement only policies, and
Yeah.
that's what we're looking at now. See, when you see all these agents, right? These ICE agents, a lot of people freaking out, thinking they're Proud Boys and stuff like that. They're not. You see all these agents. They're all from different agencies. You have DEA. Pretty soon you'll have a couple thousand FBI. There's ATF, there's Bureau of Prisons agents, marshals.
So what are
None
they
of these
doing?
guys are trained in immigration.
In the ICE?
They're they're a force multiplier for ICE. Yeah, Trump has basically integrated them into ICE. And their salaries are still being paid for by their respective agencies. So
Mm-hmm.
it's how Trump was able to create a force multiplier. He essentially doubled ICE's ERO, which is Enforcement Removal Operations. That's part of ICE. They're the ones that you see out here in the streets. So they rolled all these agents ERO, and it doesn't cost them anything because FBI is still paying for FBI agents, DEA is still paying for DEA agents. The thing is, none of these guys know anything about the immigration system, right? You know, drug enforcement guy is a drug enforcement guy. He doesn't know anything. A lot of these people too are desk jockeys. So they've never handled a person in the streets that might resist or that doesn't want to be deported. So you see there's a lot of the inhumanity you're seeing is chaos because a lot of people don't know what the hell's going on. That part's intentional too. I think that when they saw the chaos that was there, they exploited that, and they're adding more agents from these agencies. And right now, Trump, the White House has a request to send 2,000 FBI over to ICE and 20,000 National Guard soldiers in a support role for ICE. So you know when Trump said yesterday that we're going to have the military on our streets in every city, take him at his word because he's really trying to do that. And I've been saying this for about a week, and I've been thinking about it for months, and I wasn't sure if I should say it publicly or not, but I did the other day. Or I think the Donald Trump administration is trying to bring us to the brink of martial law without actually declaring martial law.
Well, yeah,
So
I think that's
military,
I think that's kind of obvious because martial law is a lot more difficult to do than what he's doing right
right,
now, but the result is almost the same. You know, um, I mean, I assume in LA you've got curfews. At a certain period of time you can't be on the streets. That sort of thing. So, yeah, I would agree with you.
yeah.
And when
Last
you talk,
night,
yeah,
last night in LA, a friend, I've got a couple of sources out there. One of them was telling me he was down LA when they essentially put in a curfew saying anyone out walking around in the downtown area, which is bordered by the highways and roughly about 100,000 people live there, would be arrested in the whole downtown area when the protests and all the stuff you saw on TV was over in a couple block area around the federal detention center.
right.
So yeah, like what we were just saying, law without actually declaring martial law.
So,
It's wild. It's
you
weird.
you were talking about just the private prison aspect of it. I wrote something back right after the election because I noticed Geo Group specifically that when Trump said Holman was going to be his border czar, the stock of that company just went straight up, and there were a couple of others too. But you know, I guess it was last week I wrote a piece and just pointed out that the whole incident in New Jersey that happened around the Delaney detention center, that's Geo
Right.
Group. And right after, I
Right.
mean, almost within a month of Trump getting sworn in, Geo Group got multi. I want to say that it was a $1.5 billion contract that they got from the government just for that specific
Right.
detention center. And I noticed you got a similar. So it's all happening around these detention centers. And I saw yesterday that Maxine Waters, I think, was on, and she was saying, almost it was almost identical to what happened in New
Right.
Jersey, where they went, to do their oversight, which they're allowed to do, and got turned away. Went back, got turned away again. So, it's a pattern, man. It really is, and it seems obvious to me, but I'm not sure really what Democrats can do about it, or what they, other
Right.
than you know denounce it, talk about it, and so on.
Right. The other part that really irks me sometimes is so a lot of us who've been covering ICE forever know that racists love ICE, right? That's where they want these cops to get fired for stuff. They can go work there.
Hmm.
Um, and it blows me away because I really hoped and expected to see some pushback from, say, a DEA agent who didn't want to be part of this, or an FBI agent or an ATF, somebody somewhere. um, within ICE somewhere. I expected some people, but it seems to me like as soon as Donald Trump said all these other agencies are going to be helping, they ran to go help, and like they bought into the whole thing, rid of immigrants, and Latinos particularly because let's face it, that's who they're targeting. They're targeting
Right.
Latinos. They're not. There's very few. You occasionally see a white dude from the Netherlands or a German or something, but I mean, you're talking about one out of like 1,000. You know what I'm saying? So it's and you don't hear them villainizing these white people like you do these Latinos, right?
Oh
You
yeah.
don't say, look, they don't, because every day they catch somebody trying to cross the border from the US either into Canada or Mexico who's running from sexual charges, murder, and they're trying to hide in another country. And it happens every day. Get caught. They have, and then on the Mexico side, they have what they it translates to the greeners, and they screen for people who are coming into the country that are running from charges in the US. Um, So you see that never hear about. You never hear ICE say, "Look, we caught this one white child rapist, so we got to get rid of all these white guys because they're all child rapists." But they're
Right.
doing that. They're doing that to Latinos, right? So they did ICE raids in Houston. They arrested like 120 something people, 128, I think. 10 had criminal records, and of course, they villainized them all over the news. They villainize every one of them as if they were criminals because mention all of them in the same breath and in the same sentence as, oh, child rapist or, double murderer. And it evokes these images in people's minds. It even does it to me. I'm like, God, that sounds a lot like when 50 people were murderers and child rapists.
Hmm.
And I know they weren't, but I know that sounds like, so you see it a lot. And I was, I really have a lot of issues with some immigration reporting out of NBC,
Right.
particularly with Julia Ainsley. But when she said that today about, with all due respect, we should, they arrested so many people that were this, that, and the other. And I was like, dude, that sounds just like that. It sounds just like the administration. Yeah, we arrested 100, and I listened to all these crimes we're going to list as if it's all of them that did this. And it's a pretty shocking thing to witness, considering what's happening on our streets right now.
Well, and people wonder why folks are not watching mainstream news as much. I mean, that's why you've got um, you know, the NBC Universal unloading some of these properties. But that's different conversation. But and we were
Yep.
talking before we jumped on. I actually unplugged from cable news really after the election and just said, I just stopped paying for it. And I mean, I stream Bloomberg, which is pretty straightforward, but and I'll check in. I've got Sirius, so I can check in on certain shows that here on MSNBC or even CNN. But it's I'll give you an example. What happened with I think his name is Terry Moran, the journalist at NBC or ABC rather. Overnight,
Yeah.
dude tweeted. And he basically, he might have had a few two drinks because it was late night tweeting, which is probably ill advised. but
Right.
but he didn't say
Right.
anything that wasn't true though. He's talking about Stephen Miller and talking about Trump and the way these guys operate. And they basically said, y'all need to get rid of this guy. And I mean, they probably won't fire him, but he's definitely, well, he's gotten suspended, you know, and they may fire him because,
Yeah.
and that's really to me the sad part is how, especially because we know what Trump's all about from the last time, how folks are
Yeah.
just rolling over.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that that's going to bode well for ABC taking that action.
Well, and
Because
on top of the
what
fact, didn't they just threw George Stephanopoulos under the bus too? They Trump had filed a
right.
suit, and I think they settled that, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
15.
So,
Yeah, 15,000,000. Yeah, so, he basically he just essentially said Stephen Miller is the hater of all haters, and honestly,
where's the lie?
Stephen Miller right, Stephen Miller would probably embrace that because he knows he's a hater, and he's all that. So, I really don't see what the issue is, and, I mean, if the administration came to me complaining about that, I'd respond with, "Have you heard what y'all have said? Because that's nothing. Are you really gonna be that sensitive
There
over
used to
something
be
so
a day
little?"
when news organizations would stand behind their journalists too, and, it
Yeah,
seems like
yeah.
that day is kinda gone.
Yeah, shame and that's a shame, you see it more often than not these days, and that's what sucks because, if for whatever reason, it made me think of all the journalists in Palestine that have been killed, in the last year and a half and how little that's talked about in our media. You know, if one journalist goes to jail in Russia, it's on every single channel.
Mhm.
So it's you see these biases across the spectrum, and what concerns me is seeing an outlet like ABC that's so big lean into is somewhat alarming because then what does the general population have in terms of accountability? Are they just going to rely on us, on independent journalists like us? I mean, that's fine. I welcome them,
I hope
but
so. That'll be good for.
well, I mean, mainstream media is taking this weird shift, and I just, in the end, an industry that's struggling so much is just doomed to die at this point, because once Trump is gone, because he will die at some point, right? That's the one thing he can't avoid.
Mhm.
Um, they're going to be left.
You heard
They're going to be
it.
left holding the bag.
We all gonna die. So,
Yeah,
people
yeah, we
people
all
are
going to.
talking about, this flotilla, with, Greta Thunberg, and I don't know what the status is of that, but I saw where I mean, they're in international waters, is the way I understood it, and I guess the Israeli military just intercepted them and took these people hostage, I mean, really. So, I mean, what do you know about that?
Yeah, I know, it got close. Probably close enough for Israel to use it as justification. I'm sure Israel was just waiting for the moment. But as far as I know as much as I know they were taken into custody. There's been
Yeah, I
some
haven't heard
videos
anything.
posted of them to show yeah, just to show that they're in good health and in good spirits. But I haven't heard anything else details wise. I know that, Israel's playing with fire on this one.
Yeah.
They're playing with some big fire. Um, but yeah, and in my opinion, because I'm one of these, I don't believe that casualty counts dictate who wins and loses wars. It's public perception, right? So, in a war that affects you really need the whole world behind you. And in that sense, Israel lost the war a long time ago. And with this, it's just gonna make that L column that much bigger, because they're just constantly punching themselves in the face. And in the PR world, in the propaganda world, that's essentially what Israel's done for the last year and a half is punch itself in the face constantly.
Yeah, they
So this
may
is
have
gonna hurt.
overstepped with this one. I'm gonna be interested to see how it turns out because, um, and I'll just say it. I mean, it's one thing, the world doesn't react the same way when a white woman gets put in danger. And I mean, it shouldn't be that way, obviously, but I think they really
Right.
got to be careful because that may be the thing. It's just like with us. I mean, black folks get killed all the time, but let something happen in New York to some white lady or even a white guy, and it shouldn't be like that, but we know it is. It's front page news. You remember the
Right.
girl that got She was like an Instagram star. You know, she had her she was operating out of her van and she went missing and it was national news. And it turned out, I guess her boyfriend had killed her in the woods or something. This is 4 or 5 years ago, I think. But I'm just saying all that to say this is kind of the first incident, as far as I know, where you've had a person that was not a person of color suddenly, yeah, Gabby,
Right.
right, um, be in some kind of, physical danger. And I'm sure they recognize that. At least I hope they do.
I know, I believe she had said something about that, acknowledging that, is she's a white girl and she's curious to see how they're gonna act,
Mm,
something along those lines. Put words in her mouth, but
yeah,
it was something along those lines, and I know she had videos set to go had Israel stopped them and taken them into custody.
yeah, right. I saw.
Yeah, full of videos from a lot of people on the boat just posted online, and I was like, "Uh-oh." But, I mean, you're right, it's you see when you talk about how people freak out about like, women or white kids or something like that, I always think of, like, in just the last and this is you and I both know this has been happening for decades, if not for
Oh yeah,
centuries, but,
absolutely.
when the war in Ukraine I talk about this one this particular incident, often because when the war in Ukraine broke out, Charlie Dad from CBS and, he was,
Like we got
talking about all the people
faded.
leaving.
Can you back up? You said something
Yeah,
about
the
you.
blue yeah, he was talking about how these, blue-eyed, blonde-haired people that look like us and how this is a more society, not like someplace far out in the Middle East, and
I
I thought,
remember that.
"Holy
I
shit."
actually wrote something
I'm
about
like,
that
"There."
because they were
Yeah,
actually, there were a lot of black people in Ukraine that were trying to get out
yeah,
and they were getting held up,
right.
and so yeah, it was really, I don't know why I was surprised, but I was at just how obvious
It it
it was.
it was weird to me because he said it, a whole lot of other news people said it, and then a lot of politicians around the world, particularly European politicians, all said it. And I'm like, "There's your global supremacy, bro.
There
From
it
the
is.
media to the politics, it's all in front of our faces." And this is where everything connects, right? So racism we experience here is also being, that racism is being exploited overseas. It's all interconnected. It's about stealing from non-white people to give the white people, and, it's war and quote unquote justice, to break up our communities, to put fathers in prison. And this is what's happening today. Exactly what ICE is doing right now. They have help of hundreds of local and state law enforcement agencies, if not 1,000 by now. Um, they have a force multiplier that I don't think has ever been seen for a domestic law enforcement action in our history. So I don't know that much manpower was pushed over just for the one thing. It's crazy.
I see my brother Egberto Willis is here. I think that I can pull him into this conversation. I've never tried it. I've read that you can do it with like 4 people. So
Yeah, I have too.
I'm we're gonna give it a try. Let me see if Mr. Willis is here.
Uh,
I mean, or if I can pull him in, if I can learn to type his name.
Egberto, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, I got it.
All right.
I'm
Right
gonna
on.
invite him in and we'll see what happens. Hopefully we don't crash. So I invited him. Now I did this once before, and the person DM me and said, they didn't like it was a lady, and she didn't like. I don't know, maybe she didn't have her makeup on. I don't know, but she said, "No, just hit me up later." So we'll so we'll see what happens. But anyway, man, I
Yeah.
just over the weekend, that's why I reached out to you because I was like, I need to get somebody that's a little more expert on this, that's looking at it from and see you're in Texas. So I'm on an island in North Carolina. It doesn't really hit me that much, although um not lately, but look at that, man. It worked. Mr. Willis. Okay,
Hey,
let me just
Hey,
introduce you real quick. This is my good friend Egberto Willis, and he is the publisher of Politics Done Right and welcome to the conversation, man. So
man.
wait, both of you guys in Texas, right?
Yes, we are in Houston
yeah, in
at that.
Houston,
All right. Represent.
Man, it's an honor to
right?
be on with both you and Arturo. You know, Arturo, I'm one of Arturo's biggest fans, and I'm one of your biggest fans, Mr. Weems. You know that.
Absolutely. Same here. Same here. So we've been just talking about what's going on in LA, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. What's your take on it?
I did my program today, and what I told folks is this: I said, it is. Look, and I use a 4 block area as an example. In Portland during the Black Lives Matter in 2020, they made it seem like Portland was exploding. And when you look at it on TV, it was the end of the world, fire and fire bombs, and Americans were there getting scared. The same thing is happening in LA. And by the way, I'm an immigrant. Arturo is an immigrant. I think, Arturo, are you an immigrant or not? I don't remember.
I'm a
Child of
descendant
immigrant.
of involuntary immigrants, so we pretty much got it
but but the idea is I have the compassion and or rather, I understand it. I don't want to disregard it. But in the case of our big politics today, I think this is all staged. And when I say staged, I mean it's really happening. But Donald Trump is doing this. He's doing the arguments with Musk and all of that to take us off of the big picture, which is B, B, and B.
That's
That
it.
is what's going to harm and change America. That bill, if that goes through, most Americans don't know how big that is. That is really the destruction of the administrative state.
Let me tell you something, Egberto.
Yeah,
I have been ever since it got out of the house. So what, a week and a half? I
Yes,
had
sir.
already started piecing together a piece on that, and it's so that bill is so deep in terms
Mhm.
of the effects and that I am having a hard time writing about it because you just okay, let's just talk about, one area in particular. And I'm like, well, boy, if I'm going to talk about that, I mean, it's just gotten so long. I'm going to have to pare it down and maybe make it two or three different articles because you can't really have just one conversation about that whole bill because you have
Right.
to look at it from different angles. Like, okay, the deficit, what's that going to do to the economy? That's a whole conversation. Then you've got, the just the healthcare aspect of it, whole conversation. And underneath all of that, as you just pointed out, is well, I'll put it this way. There's I'll when I sent out the recording of this, I'll remember to post it, but there's a video that I saw on TikTok where a woman had just fed the entire bill into Chat GPT and said, what's gonna be the effect of this? Just give it to me straight. What and dude, it's not
Well,
it is so bad that it surprised me.
Dr. Weems, let me tell you this. I did after I saw that TikTok with the woman who passed the bill through. So I didn't know if I should believe it or not. So guess what I did? I went and downloaded the entire 1,000 something page bill and I put it through ChatGPT. And I have an article that I wrote if you take a look at go to my page, there's an article that I wrote
Okay.
that displays what ChatGPT came out and said about it. It is amazing.
Is it close to what she was saying?
Oh yeah, she's right. And I asked ChatGPT for just a summary.
Hmm.
Okay. And look, so if you get a chance, just go to my thing and click on
Yeah.
it. It's there. And
Wow.
and ChatGPT, it's a terrible bill, and it hurts the people it hurts the most, Arturo and Marlon, is the people who voted for him. And
I know that's
unfortunately,
so crazy, isn't it?
it is. Look, let me tell you, most of the people who voted for him live in rural areas. Whether you are a rich rural area person or a poor rural area person, it affects you because if a hospital closes, you were rich and going to that hospital, so now
Yeah.
you can't. So it is a shame that these people are so hoodwinked, and there are some of them that just haven't realized it yet. And I don't know what it's going to take. I don't.
Well, you're starting to see. I saw yesterday, and it's one of those things where it's really difficult to feel. At least for me, it's
Hmm.
difficult for me to empathize with people in positions. This is a I want to say she's one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty,
Hmm.
down in Florida, I think. And it's, hey, whoa, I love Trump, but I didn't know this is wrong. I didn't think he was going to do all this
Hmm.
because he's snatching up people in her community. You see,
Yeah.
that maybe it's somebody she knows or people that she interacts with, and she didn't think it was going to be them. She thought it was going to be somebody else's immigrants, undocumented. You see, and you know, people are right. I mean, we told these folks. I don't know how. I don't know what else could have been said, but
Well,
I just think it's when you think it's going to be somebody else that's going to get the pain.
two of
Yeah.
my
Right.
radio folks that called into the station just about cussed me out today, in a nice way, in a nice way, in a nice
Yep.
way. And that was because they said I had too much empathy for those people. One of them called me and said, "I don't want you to speak until you hear everything that I said." He's a supporter, and he said, "I don't want you to speak until you hear this." And he let me have it. And he said, "They're haters. You're not. They're this. You're not. You share nothing in common with them." And I said, "Look, we share the humanity in common, and we have to try. You know where I'm
Sure.
at. I,
Yeah.
I'm not asking everybody to be like me. I'm not. I'm not
And
asking them to
someone
take.
just corrected me. It was Latinas for Trump, not
Oh,
Moms for Liberty.
okay, Latinas for Trump. Now,
Yeah.
another one in the chat told me that I was spineless, and he's a supporter as well,
Hmm.
and he
Yeah.
said I'm
Well, then you
spineless.
have to wear
Yeah.
Kevlar to work, huh? so I can I understand. And look, man, where I am, I'm surrounded by people
Me
that
too.
that are nice people that I interact with all the time. But there's certain ones and it's the majority of them that I know they didn't vote for Kamala. Okay, and they
Right.
have it in their mind. Well, I'm just voting for this one particular thing. I don't like the other stuff, but this is you get the whole package, right? And
Well, Arturo did a show. I was on a program once. I don't remember who was interviewing him, and that's you, Arturo. I mean you. And you had mentioned something about working with. You remember Woke, the WEOC group. You were working
Yeah.
with them, and you made a comment. I don't quite remember how you said the comment, but it was like these were people who got permission to do this. I don't remember exactly how you said it. They
hmm,
got permission to be who they really are. And ironically, just before I tapped into you, I set myself to come on you guys as soon as I got off my show, and I forgot. So I was looking at MSNBC, and Eddie Glaude. Eddie Glaude
yeah,
came out and he said he was just about crying. I got a cut of it, and I'm going to prepare it as a blog and post it. He just about said, "Unfortunately, we're showing who we are, and who we really, really are." And
hmm
then he said he just got back from France, and he said this guy came up to him, an older guy, and said, "When I was young, the only thing I wanted to do is go to the United States. We really looked up to the United States. My kids don't even want to hear the word United States."
I told my wife. My wife and I were talking yesterday, and I said to her, um, basically, what country now, going forward, let's just say all this stuff gets, put to bed, we get rid of Trump. Who are we going to be able to go to and tell how to run their democracy?
I don't know.
Who are we going to be able to go to say, you should do it like us, like, and I'm not saying that America has not ever been at fault or wrong or whatever. I mean, we know the history, but we always had some little bit of credibility, right? Especially around just, we're a nation of laws. The laws might have been bad laws, but we
Hmm.
had, and now we got people that, pardon my language, they've just said, fuck it.
Yeah.
We'll do what we
Right.
want to do and catch us if you can. Right. So I'm just
Right.
sort of like, we aren't in a, American exceptionalism. It's a joke now to me. I
Yeah.
mean, that's my
Let me tell
opinion.
you something,
And
Marlon. Um, and this I'm going to tell you this as a foreign guy or a former foreign guy. What's happening in America today is what those of us who lived in Panama, Costa Rica, Jamaica, and all these places have always known about America that Americans didn't know about America.
bingo.
You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I
And you
think
know
the
when they
only
make
people I
come,
would say that did
yeah,
know were folks that look like us,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I think we knew what we always knew, right?
Yeah.
So Arturo,
Right.
you jump in here, man. It's you've been silent for a while. Where are you on this?
Well, I mean, to touch on what you said, I when my grandma came to stay here with us for, she wanted to live the last part of her life with her grandkids and stuff. She told us all kinds of things that like you wouldn't have seen otherwise if you didn't have that perspective from somebody who lived under the boot of the US for 50 something years at that point. And, it really changed the way I looked at a lot of things. I was already disenfranchised with a lot of, US society, particularly with like racism and stuff, because one of the first things that happened in Texas was the James Byrd lynching. Egberto
Hmm.
knows about this.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And
I was living in
right,
Arkansas,
I came from,
so I knew about it.
so I was from Jersey, and we dealt with racism in the community, but like you're dealing with like street level type Italian guy calling you a spick or using the N word type situation, right? They're not out there trying to put burning crosses in front of our, they're out there trying to lynch nobody. They're not out there trying to do this Klan shit. So in my mind, as a kid, growing up, I was thinking the Klan shit was gone, and what I saw in Union City and in Jersey was what's left of racism. And then I moved south, and that shit happened, and it's
Yeah.
just like, goddamn, I was wrong. I was wrong, and this whole thing we're seeing happening today is part of that. It's the culmination of just nonstop racism everywhere you see it, whether it's a microaggression on the news, like the Julie Ainsley thing we talked about earlier, or whether it's just flat out N words on Twitter and things like that. I think that the issue a lot of the times boils down to we need to be talking to people in our immediate proximity. And that, for parents, that means your kids, especially if you have teenage boys that are, because they're the targets. Teenage white boys on the internet are the target for these hate groups. So, like, I'm surrounded by a lot of MAGA around here, but we also have an understanding that, when I'm not in town, they watch my shit. When they're not in town, I watch their shit. If some suspicious stuff is going on when they're not at home, I intervene. Like, vice versa. We communicate. We protect our neighborhood, our little area.
Yeah.
Um, and there are a couple people around here that I ain't afraid to say it. They are racist, plain and simple. And there's some other people who are like misguided. Like a lot of these Latinos, when you tried to warn them about what Trump was going to do to immigrants, they kept thinking is no, he's just going after the criminals. They kept thinking we're the one being paranoid. We're, overreacting. One of my neighbors is like that. And that neighbor right now, like 3 different times, like, "I'm sorry," and it's like, "Dude, whatever, it's done, we'll deal with it." So, like, I know that even though a lot of my neighbors are MAGA, if ICE comes on my block, we're gonna have problems, you know what I mean? So, that's part of protecting your community. So when you see that in LA, that's what's happening. When you see it in New York City, these are people coming out to the street to defend their neighbors. If ICE came for the Indian family down the block, we would all be in the street. If ICE came for my parents, my Jamaican stepdad, my Cuban mom, all my neighbors out in the street. And it's scary to think that that would be seen as impeding the federal government in some way.
Or
So
insurrect.
being an insurrection, right, right, being an insurrection, and all you're doing is protecting your friends and neighbors, as we're supposed to do, as a community and as a society. So I think it's, this just it's where we are now. And like you can everything that's happening right now, I think for most people in America, you could take some piece of your life and associate it with what's happening right now, just like I can with my neighbors. If ICE came on my block, I know it would be like LA and shit. People would
Well,
be in
see,
their
that's the
faces
thing.
telling them to go
See,
away.
I live in a resort community, a vacation community on an island.
Right.
Um, I can go all day without seeing a black person if I try, unless I go to Walmart or something. So so I don't see police hardly. I saw um like Customs and Border Patrol, because we're on the ocean, so there's
Right.
some entry points, and that was 2 years ago. So
Right.
I can just go forever, and this island is almost, I would think, almost the size of Manhattan, not as populated, from end to end, and it's a whole different situation because we're not the target market for that kind,
Mhm.
you know.
Right.
And I will tell you, I see a lot less in terms of, because there's a lot of construction that happens around here since COVID. I see a whole lot less in terms of Latinos. Man, it used to be, man, it was like every house you would see guys, and nobody was white. You know, not anymore. So folks have to
Yeah.
be careful what they wish for. Guys, we're closing in on an hour, and I love the conversation, but A, we're closing in on an hour. B, it's almost dinner time over here. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. Same here.
I mean, I love talking to you, but I'm getting hungry.
But you get hungry, man.
Yeah,
Hey,
right,
look,
No,
right.
seriously though. Look, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, these two guys are, in terms of people that I turn to when I want to talk about, things like this. These guys are at the top of the list. So if you're not following us, please do. Check out, and as a matter of fact, check out my newsletter in terms of becoming a paid subscriber. I'm making you an offer you can't refuse, because school's out and my kids are living with me, and these grocery bills are just getting out of control. So definitely consider becoming a paid subscriber. If not all of us, try to pick one, and because it all helps, and it looks like just kind of where we're headed, guys like Arturo and Egberto are going to be essential. So, if you can support us, please do.
can I say one quick thing, Marlon?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I was listening to one of these lives with Cox on. I think it's called the something podcast, the Guarded podcast, something like that. And Cox was on, and she said something about how what's happening to this platform now with all these people coming in. When I said, with all the big media coming in, and she thinks that there's a consolidation coming. And in my mind, I'm like, I really hope not, because that means we would have reverted just to what
They
we
just move
constant
from one place to another. Yeah.
right, which
But
I think
we've talked about this on several
right.
We have
occasions.
we have
And I think to a large extent, um, our subscribers, a guy I used to work with said, vote with your money.
Right.
Subscribers can decide.
Yeah.
right?
And
And if,
Right.
and if they like it and they want it to stay like this, they can make that.
well,
That's one thing about it is people can vote with their money. And
right.
I have questioned
Right.
why folks, people do what they do, and there's a certain allure of celebrity, right? And I look at some of these folks. There was an article 2 or 3, maybe a few weeks back, that featured some of the big names that have come here, and you know, folks got like 100,000 subscribers, and I'm like, paid subscribers, and I'm just like, why? I mean, if you're saying that traditional media is the problem, then why not support
Right.
non-traditional media, which is us,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I'll just say, man, you know what I did? I dropped the price. I think most folks are like $50 a year, $5 a
Yeah.
month. I dropped my price because I'm just sort of like, I'm gonna make it as easy as it can be for me to do well at it, but also for folks to, because look, we know what the economy is doing, right?
Let me ask you this. How did the price drop for you? Did you see a difference in subscriptions?
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, so I just figured, okay, if I've got 100 paid subscribers at $50, which would you rather have? 300 at 30?
I would rather have 300. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just kind of the math I did. So I'm just going to leave it there for the foreseeable future. And I think at this point, it's just sort of getting the word out there for people to know that, hey, I mean, obviously we want to be able to survive, but there's something in the business that I used to be in, trading. There's something called price discovery,
Right.
and the market will find the level where people are interested in owning something. And
Right.
so if 50 is not the level, maybe 30 is the level.
Right.
And at a certain point, you can realize, okay, wait, that's too cheap. But for right now, I think in the last 30 days, I was looking this morning, I think I gained maybe 20 or 25 paid subscribers.
Okay. Well, good. Maybe I should try
You know?
something like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Because that's the beauty of this platform. And there are a lot of things that I don't agree with about how it's run, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. Like I noticed this morning, and I'll wrap up on this. That now you can do YouTube shorts. I haven't explored how to
I,
do it.
I just I just saw the message come up today, and
Yeah,
I
I was
clicked
like,
it and said,
okay, wait
okay,
a minute.
fine.
Okay. So they're constantly they're making it harder and harder for you to quit and go somewhere else.
Right. Right.
So yeah. I mean, so guys, hey, I appreciate you. And now I know that I can actually get 3 people on here. So
Yeah. No kidding.
you know, let's do this again.
Anytime, just call me
Yes.
up. Call me up, guys. Have a good one. All right.
All right, Arturo.
All right.
See you next time. Same
Thanks
here.
again.
Folks,
Good to see you.
see you on the other side.
Bye bye.
Yeah.